How to take pride in being a perfectionist. Perfectionism is a personality trait that can have negative attributes and is often a manifestation of deep and painful psychological and emotional issues. It is not a healthy pursuit of excellence. Instead, it is important that you practice healthy striving by knowing your limitations and working towards realistic goals. In the process, you may need to be able to recognize the signs of more severe perfectionistic tendencies and develop strategies to deal with them. With a little self-acceptance and reflection, you will be able to manage and take pride in your achievements. Method 1: Appreciating healthy striving. 1. Enjoy the journey. Perfectionists have a tendency to fixate on the results of a task, instead of appreciating the process itself. If you are practicing healthy striving, you will enjoy the task you are working on, regardless of the outcome. Try to enjoy the moment and take pride in the work that you do. For example, in healthy striving you will have a good time working on a school project and not just be fixated on the final grade. 2. Take pride in setting reasonable goals. Be happy about your ability to set realistic goals and objectives. You know your abilities and try to work with them. Instead of setting yourself up for failure, you create and meet the practical expectations you set for yourself. For example, you set a goal to run 3 miles instead of 5, because you know that 5 is an unrealistic objective for your current physical shape. 3. Appreciate your ability to learn from mistakes. Instead of viewing failure as something that should be avoided at all costs, you understand it as something that you can learn from. Be proud of your ability to take a positive away from something that is considered a negative. It is important that you understand that you are human and that mistakes are part of the experience. For example, instead of viewing a bad grade as a major failure, look at it as an opportunity to improve your knowledge of a certain subject. 4. Be proud of your ability to bounce back. As a healthy striver, you are a resilient person who takes adversity in stride. Instead of being bogged down by mistakes, you use them to your own advantage and learn from them. You refuse to let your fears and anxieties limit your ability to perform and create. For example, you get work completed on time and avoid procrastinating because you are not paralyzed by a fear of failure. Method 2: Practicing self-acceptance. 1. Appreciate your positive traits. Celebrate the fact that your perfectionism can make you punctual, goal-oriented and high-achieving. You are someone who can be counted on to finish a project on time and perform to the best of your ability. You push others to do their best and expect the same from yourself. It is okay to be proud of your positive traits. Be sure to discuss these self-affirmations with a counselor or therapist. It is important that you address your own self-worth and are not simply reaffirming problematic emotions and traits. 2. Understand your imperfections. Take the time to investigate and try to accept your imperfections. It is important to understand how your drive for perfection impacts those around you. Recognize that your perfectionism might be less about excellence and more about dealing with intense social pressure and shame. If you are able to address your imperfections, you may find that you are generally less anxious and more happy. It may be difficult to acknowledge your imperfections on your own. A licensed therapist or counselor may help you practice self-reflection. 3. Try to be vulnerable. Perfectionism can be a shield that you hide behind in order to avoid being vulnerable. Because of an intense fear of social criticism or rejection, it may feel safer to put up a front of perfection. However, this can lead you to feeling isolated and foster intense anxiety. Instead, try to be authentic and acknowledge the times when you are struggling with your perfectionism. Be vulnerable and let those around you know that you are having a hard time and need some help. Authenticity and vulnerability are practices that you need to exercise every day in order to manage your perfectionism. 4. Repeat your affirmations. As a part of your practice of self-acceptance, focus on your positive attributes every day. Repeat them to yourself every morning or when you have feelings of self-doubt and shame. You might also consider writing them down on a list that you carry around with you during the day. If you begin to feel bad about yourself, look at your list and think about your positive traits. Remember that perfectionism can be a maladaptive personality trait and that it often masks deeper emotional issues. Make sure that you are practicing self-acceptance and not simply reaffirming problematic traits. Consult with a therapist or psychologist about any feelings or shame or self-doubt related to your perfectionism. Method 3: Managing perfectionism. 1. Seek help. If your perfectionism is hurting you and those around you, you should seek help as soon as possible. A licensed counselor or therapist may help you understand the underlying emotions spurring your perfectionism. They may also suggest some strategies for helping you manage it. 2. Practice mindfulness. When perfectionist thoughts enter your mind, try to recognize and challenge those thoughts. Take time to reflect on your feelings and the impulses they inspire. Try meditating to become more mindful and aware of your perfectionism. When you start having perfectionist thoughts, ask yourself questions like, am I jumping to conclusions, or is this as bad as it seems? 3. Make a list of the advantages and disadvantages of being perfect. In order to begin addressing your perfectionism, your counselor or therapist may suggest that you create a list of the positives and negatives of being a perfectionist. You may find that the negatives of perfectionism, anxiety, damaged relationships, substance abuse, outweigh the positives. Creating a list may help you gain some perspective and insight on the impact of your perfectionism. You may also want to consider how your actions impact others. 4. Be realistic about your abilities. Look at the areas of your life where you experience intense perfectionism and try to set more realistic goals. Setting objectives that you can meet will help limit any negative emotions you might experience from failing to meet your unrealistic expectations. Whenever you begin something, ask yourself if you have created impossible expectations for yourself. Achieving reasonable goals will help you feel better about yourself and negate any negative emotions. For example, you may set a goal of running 5 miles and only complete 4 miles. As a perfectionist, you may feel disappointed about your performance and anxious about improving it. Instead, tell yourself that 4 miles is good enough for now and accept that you might not be able to run 5 miles. 5. Learn how to deal with criticism. Instead of viewing criticism as personal attack, think of it as an opportunity to learn and grow. Understand that mistakes are a natural thing and that you have a right to make them. If you try to distance your fear of failure from your feelings of self-worth, you may find that you are less angry and defensive. When you make a mistake, try to think of things that you learned or could learn from it. 6. Be selective in your perfectionism. Try to limit the spaces in which you apply your perfectionism. Work and school are natural places to push yourself and try to achieve excellence. However, the same is not true of your personal relationships or events beyond your control. Regardless of your actions, these things will never be perfect and you should accept that. Concentrate on applying your perfectionism where it is useful and applicable. Try to think about what it would be like to be less perfectionistic in a certain situation. Consider why you expect perfection from other people and how that impacts your relationships with them. Method 4: Identifying perfectionism. 1. Recognize any black and white thinking. Perfectionists have a tendency to have an all or nothing mindset in which they view themselves as either successes or failures. There is no middle ground between the two, which can lead to extreme emotional swings. This can push you to achieve your goals, but also result in intense depression and frustration if they are not met. Because of this all or nothing mentality, people suffering from extreme versions of perfectionism are more likely to be displeased with their bodies and develop eating disorders. 2. Note if you are highly critical of others. Because you have such high expectations of yourself, you tend to project those same expectations onto other people. This can lead you to be overly critical of others and denigrate them. Because of this, you may find yourself unable to work with others and socially isolated. This can lead to severe loneliness and depression. This may also make you highly critical of romantic partners, making intimate relationships difficult to maintain. Because of this critical outlook, you may also find yourself taking pleasure in the failings of others. 3. Identify a sensitivity to criticism. Most people do not appreciate criticism. However, perfectionists have a particularly strong reaction to it. Because doing well is tied so closely with a perfectionist's sense of self-worth, you may have a tendency to be extremely sensitive to most forms of reproach or criticism. If you become extremely angry or depressed when you receive even minor criticism, your perfectionism may be more problematic. If you find yourself having regular and strong reactions to criticism, consider visiting a therapist or counselor. 4. Note if you engage in substance abuse. Because the anxieties of perfectionism can be overwhelming, you may find yourself abusing drugs and alcohol to numb those feelings. Substance abuse is a common symptom of maladaptive perfectionism. If you believe that you have a substance abuse problem, talk to a counselor or therapist. Remember that substance abuse can lead to addiction. 5. Observe significant procrastination. One of the most common traits of more severe, or maladaptive, perfectionism is an irrational tendency to delay or avoid completing tasks. This might seem counterintuitive, but an intense fear of failure, which is a common trait associated with perfectionism, can prevent you from completing tasks. If you find yourself dreading completing projects and waiting until the last minute to complete them, this may signal a more maladaptive response to perfectionism. If you find that your anxiety is so intense that you miss deadlines or fall behind, be sure to talk to a counselor or therapist.